So in 2004, I wrote this novel, my first novel ever, called To Speak is to Not See. And 2004. I was living in Hiroshima, Japan. It starts with a quote from Derrida, which comes from the documentary about him. To speak is to not see, so all speech is, to some extent, blind. So I open with this, and that's where the title comes from. And I took these photos with a digital camera I had. It's inside the train. I had short hair then. And I put them in the book. And so I've decided, this starts with the prologue, to read from this a bit and introduce this to viewers of this page. It's never been published, starting with page 1, the prologue. Okay, so let me introduce this. This was the first novel, full novel, or no, it's really, I guess would be considered a novella, 40,000 words or so, 42,000, something like this. It's not a long novel, it's a short novel, but it's a novel nonetheless. It's not a short story. I wrote this between really 2004, 2005, and just kept editing it and sort of tweaking it. So I have it listed as 2004 through 2006. And that's actually those 2 years I was living in Hiroshima. I was still married. I had been married for 5 years, long before my daughter was born. But after I had finished graduate school the first time, and so I had done Kobo Abe, and I did a talk on Abe Kobo Abe, the box man, on this page. And that's easy to find. And I actually mentioned this novel in that talk very briefly, because this was influenced by his work, especially Boxman, but other things as well, in terms of style and doing, like he does these things with notebooks. And here, what I did was each chapter, as you'll see, has like a symbol, and that represents a character. But the line between the identities of the characters, the lines are sometimes blurred, even though we have male and female characters both. There are references that cross over the lines and confuse the identities to some degree, although they're distinctive at the same time. And you have this male-female thing, and there's violence, and there's the issues of identity, violence, sanity versus insanity kind of thing. And you have collectors, and you have detectives, and you have possible criminals, and you have innocents, and you have all these different things, but yet the line, again, between the characters at times becomes blurred, and the once innocent person seems to be not innocent, and the once terrible person seems to be maybe not so terrible, and it just deals with identity. I was also reading Alain Robbe-Grillet, a French author of Nouveau Roman, a new novel writer, 1950s at the time, he was calling it this, where he used these kind of very detailed descriptions of things like shadows on walls and in corners, and like I can't say it anymore. The kind of paintings that look like realistic and things like this, but it's like it's an illusion. So he dealt with these kinds of things, and I think this also influenced the writing. There's a scene where the shadow of the fly across the wall, this kind of thing. And that could also be Nosferatu, right, in the film, in film noir, and all these, some of the filmic things. Robbe-Grillet was also interested in those. Abe Kobo also collaborated with Hiroshi Teshigahara on film. So these kinds of things were influencing this. Paul Auster's City of Glass, which I think I came to that later, actually, which I now have been teaching that for years and years. I certainly, when I read this now, can see some parallels, but I do think that kind of came from Kobo Abe, Moitsuki Chizu, the Ruined Map, Boxman, Alain Robbe-Grillet, The Erasers, The Voyeur, and some other things. Also in The Labyrinth, which is a story of a soldier walking through this strange labyrinthine town and the package to deliver and this kind of thing. A lot of those elements are in this, and reading it now I see them. But it also is a piece of its time. It's interesting to read it now, the technology and the things at the time. I have these detectives in a car with like pushing in the lighter and pulling it out and the speakers, and they're playing the radio. And I mean, this is before the iPads and the iPhones and Wi-Fi and all this stuff and social media. And the older man describing the younger generation with colored hair, smoking when they're not supposed to be smoking, and these kinds of things, or vending machines selling pornography. I mean, you don't see this anymore in Japan. You did in the 90s, because now it's all on the internet for free. So this does deal with some of those aspects too of what's called the hentai, or the pervert. In Japan, even in Tokyo, even now, there are these cars for women only because men will grope because it's crowded, and these kinds of things. So I was really looking with a very harsh, maybe, or open eyes, or whatever you want to say, at Japanese society from the perspective of an outsider. Being in Japan, I wasn't living in Tokyo at that time. I am now. Of course, the world has completely changed since I wrote this, and I'm a different person now too. But I was living in Hiroshima, as I said, and this is before I'd lived in Fukuoka, which is a totally different place. The dark alleyways and the double mirrors and all these images are certainly part of that Abe Kobo-esque world, and his Boxman has photos like that in the novel that he had taken in the 1970s. This is in 2004, 5, and then at the far end 6. I think most of the photographs 2004. I was taking with this digital camera I had. It's before the iPhone. But like those things that I saw in Hiroshima, the narrow alleyways at night, especially with the walls on the two sides and the double mirrors and the things, like really reminded me of the world of Abe Kobo and the photos he had taken in black and white in the 70s. And so I made my photos black and white, although they were digital, and put them in. And so that's definitely an influence of Boxman and Abe Kobo. It deals with, it's a detective story. It deals with identity. It deals with a crime. It deals with, there was things like a Ryu Murakami, not Haruki, wrote these kinds of things about, there were these like terrible murders, teenage boy cutting off the head of another kid. There's Coin Locker Babies, which I read when I was in graduate school before writing this, translated by the guy who was my advisor at that school, Stephen Snyder, about these kinds of murders and, like teens and issues around bullying and things like this. And there's some personal things in here, the little ones that are just hidden between the lines kind of thing, but it's certainly not about the author. These are really disturbed characters, many of them. Either they're passive-aggressive lives, but they're doing something that they think they're doing right, but they're actually, the reader can see that what they're doing or the way of thinking, they think that they're better than someone else or less perverted or less, guilty or whatever it is, but we can see, kind of like with any unreliable narration, from Nabokov's Humbert to Poe's, very simply, I mentioned Poe in this, right? The detective stories of Dupin, Poe's detective stories, which were considered the first detective stories ever, by the way, which also Paul Auster references this in City of Glass, and so on. But these unreliable narrators that you find in these fictions, I was going to say Poe's Telltale Heart, which opens with, "Why say you I'm mad? I'm not crazy." And then the narrator goes on to talk about how he killed this guy because he doesn't like the way his eye looks and the way how he buried him and so on. So they're unreliable narrators, but also I would mention, which is something I just taught in my class for the umpteenth time in my Japanese literature class, Yabu no Naka by Ryunosuke Akira, who the film Rashomon is based on that, which is the Rashomon effect. Different people describing the murder that occurred in a different way, and they all give a different version, and so they're unreliable. And so these narrators are very unreliable, dealing with identity, blurred lines, kind of a postmodern thing going on in the way that it's structured, and it gets more postmodern and experimental in some ways as it goes on. So I'm not sure if I'm going to read the whole thing or not yet, but I may. If there's enough interest on the page, I'll split it into maybe hour-long readings or something. And because it shifts between the characters, I can read like a set of the characters, and then when it shifts back to the first, I can then start the next part maybe. And I'll also edit this with the photos in place and the symbols that represent the characters, because there's no character name given or title that matches, but there are symbols that I used, and then that will help the reader keep the characters straight if they couldn't already, but it's there. And there's also this prologue and epilogue and some other sort of sections that have labels, like the Tale of Two Detectives, and that comes back, and it ends up, it's a little bit also Murakami Haruki Murakami, like the format he uses on Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World, if anyone's read that, or 1984 1Q84, based on Orwell, right? That, or not based on, but 1Q84 is an homage to Orwell, where you have, in his case, it's two worlds go back and forth, and then they kind of, at some point, the two worlds come together and the characters come together. This is not two worlds, it's several characters in different settings, and the lines are more blurred, and it's a bit more avant-garde experimental, you could say, in terms of its postmodern, whatever, postmodern-esque thing that I did with it, because I was interested in experimental writing at the time. Abe Kobo was pretty experimental for his time, Alain Robbe-Grillet also. It's the several characters, but what I want to say is that as it goes on, the lines become further and further blurred, and some of the stories do intersect in different ways, kind of like Murakami would take the two worlds and they become one world. This is a little more complex in a way than that, actually. This novel I wrote at the age of, how old was I? I was still in my 20s, I think, is that right? 2004. This is 14, 24, this is 21 years ago. I was 31. I was around 30, 31, 32. So my early 30s, I wrote this, very early 30s, and now 52. So I was a different person. The world was a different place. I was living in Hiroshima, teaching English to business students and writing this thing in between classes and at home on weekends and stuff. And I lived with my wife for 5 years at that time. We were still both very young. We'd been married for 5 years. I just want to make the point that this is not a novel I wrote yesterday or last year or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but I wrote it over 20 years ago. And I wrote other things after, and then I ended up going to Brown for creative writing. But this was never published, and this was not ever like shared with people there or anything either. It's actually remains this kind of manuscript tucked away in the labyrinth of my own labyrinth of manuscripts. I have a lot of things, a lot of short stories and some other novellas and things. So I'm sharing it for the first time in this format via YouTube. Prologue. You have a dream. In this dream, you are seated in an exceedingly narrow alleyway, one that resembles the many narrow alleyways in and around your neighborhood. You are seated in this alleyway because you are waiting, although you aren't yet aware for exactly whom or what. The pavement beneath you is cold and damp. It feels as real to you in the dream as the futon had felt to you when you lay yourself upon it some hours earlier. The concrete walls, the alley surrounding you are barely visible in the darkness. Nonetheless, you are able to make out a nebulous stain upon one of the walls. The wall to your left, to be precise, like an abstract Rorschach blot. Further on, you see the blurred outline of a human figure and hear the barking of a dog. A sense of unheimlich, of the uncanny, takes hold of you as you realize you have dreamed this very same dream so many times before. Each iteration, or reiteration, of the dream concluding in your suddenly waking without any clue as to what made you wake. And that is, you cannot remember the dream's contents until the next time you dream it. And by the end of that dream, you always wake up without any memory of the last time you dreamt it, and so on, and ad infinitum. The clopping of footsteps now echoes from the opposite end of the alleyway, and as you turn to face the figure who appears behind you, the figure is wearing a fierce no drama mask, you determine that this time you will enlist its aid in decoding this recurring dream. This dream in which you both play an equally important role, for you've gathered from your studies in both traditional and so-called New Age psychology that all of the characters in all of your dreams are none other than aspects of yourself, of yourselves. All are stand-ins for issues that you must resolve, issues that refuse to be placated through logic or reasoning, issues resistant to analysis in the waking world that have, left with no other choice, retreated into the labyrinth of your subconscious mind. This masked figure that now hovers above you, casting its shadow upon your increasingly diminishing form, this dark shape, decidedly male, brandishing, as he does, a wooden rice-pounding mallet similar to the one you recall, albeit vaguely, from your childhood. Or rather, does the object signify some aspect of your childhood? Is it simply phallic, as Freud would have claimed? This enigmatic character, too, is in fact, and in fiction, merely a symbol of some aspect of your own mind, and it need not be feared, but rather placated through an understanding of its essential nature, which in essence is also your own essential nature. Or so you tell yourself in the dream. And then you see an object wrapped in an orange-red colored furoshiki cloth, sitting by its foot. It's that in-between color they use to paint Shinto shrines, to be precise, that reddish color. But as you're about to open your mouth to ask, what is it? The masked figure strikes you with the rice-pounding mallet. Again and again, you are stricken, or you're struck, stricken. You refuse to give in to the pain which is as real as any you've ever experienced in waking life. For you know that this is simply a test of willpower, one through which you must pass if you're ever to vanquish your internal demons. The blows continue to fall upon you, one after the next, relentless, and your painful wails intermingle with the harsh crack of the wood against flesh. Does flesh crack? Certainly bone does, echoing through the narrow alleyway. And then it's over as suddenly as it began. The figure has already retreated into the darkness without your having had time to ask it any questions. It's left you face down on the pavement in a puddle of sticky body fluids. You hear the buzzing of flies hovering somewhere nearby, and you see directly in front of you, through bleary eyes, the object still swathed in its orange-red furoshiki cloth. It's shaped like a melon, ovular, though somewhat lopsided, as if partially crushed. Is it a piece of fruit or something else, something non-vegetal? You must once again ask yourself whether you're still dreaming. The question, however, has already been rendered irrelevant by the extent of your psychophysical suffering. Tears and mucus and blood cover the side of your bruised face. This pain somehow reminds you of snow, cold and wet. And so again, as before, you'll have to wait for someone, or perhaps for something, to arrive and to give you an indication, a clue as to what to do next. If this is a dream the way you figure it, you will soon wake up in your familiar futon, and all will be forgotten once again, at least until the next time. A Tale of Two Detectives. Detective S plucks 2 cigarettes from the crushed carton lying on the dash of his 19-something Chevrolet and offers one to his partner, Detective M, who who pushes the flat end of the lighter beneath the ancient radio cassette player with a calloused thumb. The car's worn wipers squeak and squeal across the windshield, spreading the increasingly dense flakes of snow across it like acrylic upon canvas. The noise of the wipers is punctuated only by the sparse mechanical beat of an electronic bass drum emanating from the small speakers in the dash. The left speaker's damaged, and each rhythmical pound of the drum erupts in an explosion of static. When the lighter pops up, Detective S reaches for it lazily, and he lights both cigarettes without taking his eyes off the road for a single moment. A thick film of smoke soon permeates the interior. The car. Are you hungry yet? Detective S asks. There are sandwiches in the back seat. I think we've already finished all the coffee, though. I can wait. Detective M takes a pull from his cigarette, and then he extracts it with two slender fingers, blowing a column of smoke from his nostrils that forms a reverse question mark in the air. Good, we're almost there. Where are we, though, Detective? You'll see soon enough for yourself. This isn't the first time, after all. It isn't? You mean you talk too much? Relax. But I thought, haven't you read the deposition yet? Well, actually, no, I was in such a rush that The dirge-like thudding of the bass drum comes to an end, and the voice of an amateur DJ abruptly replaces it. And that was a track from David Bowie's 1995 masterpiece, One Outside, called Wishful Beginnings. For some unfathomable reason, the track has been ignored, perhaps even despised, by critics and listeners alike. There was even a version of the album that elided the track completely, if you can believe that. Truly a crime. Next up, something from the reclusive Scott Walker's later Tilt, released the same year. Can we please listen to something else? Detective M interjects, rubbing his eyes with chapped knuckles. A long piece of ash falls from Detective S's cigarette, landing beside the ashtray as he reaches for the presets on the radio console. Have yet to confirm the details. We will do another update as soon as we have more information. In the meantime, here's one from Miles Davis's excellent Aura, a track entitled Red. Detective M leans back in his seat thinking, I hate jazz, especially this Polakian fusion type crap jazz. Whatever happened to simplicity, to Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong singing, you say potato, I say potato. He coughs as he crushes the dying embers of his cigarette on the edge of the scuffed plastic ashtray. Why can't we listen to something more accessible? Why can't we listen to a top 20 station, even NPR News? Why does it always have to be this weirdo avant-garde stuff? I think I'll have one of those sandwiches in the back. After all, he says aloud now, pushing his frustration into his belly as he reaches behind him for the bag. Suit yourself. This is the exit here. Better hold tight, though. I've got to make a hairpin turn. This isn't an exit, Detective. It's an on-ramp. Trust me, Detective. You do trust me, don't you? Yes, of course, I... The bag of sandwiches slides across the back seat as Detective S maneuvers the car a full 90 degrees and begins driving up the on-ramp. Miles's trumpet making unearthly noises that cut through both the rattling of the over-revved engine and the spinning of tires on ice. Detective M closes his eyes and holds his breath, contemplating the worst. You know, that woman was hacked to bits and dumped in the river. That's what the report says. Detective S mouths, the sound of his voice all but drowned out by the noise. Huh? And apparently she was with child, too. Nice, eh? As the car lunges forward, Detective M's stomach somersaults, the greasy smell of the sandwich he was going to eat lingering. The woman's daughter is our number one suspect right now. Her daughter, but why? Detective M shouts, feeling carsick. God only knows. The daughter and the husband have both disappeared, you see. It's quite possible that they planned the murder together, or perhaps the daughter offed him as well, and no one has yet to discover the body. Anyway, that's why we're here. We need to find these things out for ourselves. Sick. The world is a sick place, detective. No, I mean, I'm not feeling too well. You don't say. Hold tight. Once I get us to the top of the ramp, it'll be smooth sailing. Only another couple of minutes, detective, then we're home free. Can you keep yourself together for that long? I think so. Here, have another cigarette. It'll quell the nausea and stave off the hunger, too. The car bucks, then it moves forward again. As Detective X decelerates, the driver's side scraping against a metal pole with a diamond-shaped stop sign on it. Its back spattered with what appears to be red paint, or perhaps animal blood. He accelerates once more, the car gliding to the top of the on-ramp as though it were instead sliding down a hill in reverse. Detective M dry heaves into his hands, one of which has crushed his still-lit cigarette. Afterward, he does a quick mental scan to make sure he's still alive. I told you to trust me, didn't I? Shortcut. Never had a problem before? Nope, never. How many times have you come here before anyway, detective? Detective S's face now appears green-gray in the muted light of the car. Never mind, we're almost there, so stop asking so many questions, okay? Think about it, detective. You'll understand soon enough. If I've been here, you've been here too. We stay together, no? You're right, I guess. Hey, watch out! A car, small, two-door, candy red, Japanese make, whizzes across the thick sheet of ice and snow, like a panther hot in pursuit of its next meal. Detective S's car stutters and stalls as he attempts to maneuver it into the opposite lane. Shit, this could be it. Damn nutcase gonna get us killed. The red Japanese car swerves and then it disappears into the fog. And with a subtle twist of the wrist, key still in the ignition, the engine of the Chevrolet turns over, black smoke rising from the rusty tailpipe as static white noise continues to hiss from the speakers. The detectives remain motionless for a time, breathing in fumes, smelling of scorched rubber and something else. The sound of their labored inhalations and exhalations, in near-perfect synchronicity and punctuated by the radio interference, pulsates inside the interior of the vehicle like a weary aorta, attempting to force blood through a network of atrophied veins. Good thing we stalled. Detective S's words sound distant, unreal, as though spoken by a ghost. That could have been us. What are you saying exactly, detective? Let's have a look. Come on. Detective S flips on the emergency lights and slowly gets out of the car, placing one booted foot onto the packed snow and ice below as if to test it before the other. Detective M follows his partner's example, but as soon as he begins to walk on the slick snow below, he slips and falls forward, landing on his hands and knees, a position akin to that of a crouching tiger, or alternately, a chastised puppy. 4 sets of small blinkers, 2 sets on either side of the squared-off back of the old Chevrolet, wink on and off like a pair of astonished eyes behind reflective plastic spectacles, as Detective M stands, noticing only after a few steps that there's a slight pain in his knees and his back, as well as a wheezing from his chest. He was prone to bouts of asthma as a boy. He cannot see more than a few meters in front of him for the snow and heavy mist permeating the air. The title of an old science fiction film by George Lucas flits through his mind, something with a series of letters and numbers in it, and then it dissolves like the melting snowflakes that have fallen upon his brow as he moves toward the indistinct outline of his partner's figure ahead. Detective M eventually manages, limping, to catch up to his partner, whom he finds waiting beside the candy-red Japanese car that had nearly hit them earlier. The car, a Mazda Miata, has crashed into a very gnarled and withered snow-covered fir tree, and now lies, split open like a freeze-dried, rotted watermelon. What's left of the windshield is covered in dark, syrupy blood, and the driver's side door is gone. Detective M sighs to himself as he peers inside the metal exoskeleton that remains. The vehicle, tiny snowflakes like gnats sting his face repeatedly. Where's the driver? The body's not inside? No. No body. Nobody. Keep searching then. The driver must have been thrown from the car. Hard to see anything this blizzard. Detective S pauses long enough to light and then take a long drag from his cigarette. He appears as cool and collected as any gumshoe from the movies. Detective M thinks dreamily to himself, and isn't it amazing that his cigarette stays lit in the snow-laden maelstrom? Detective M now recalls by some oblique association the wonder he'd felt as a child upon discovering that if one pulled some of the feelers from a fly's underside, the others would still continue moving. Or that one could burn leaves, even insects, with a magnifying glass and some sunlight. He had always wanted to be a scientist when he grew up, to study the unshakable, quote, laws of physics, and thereby to follow in the footsteps of the great, albeit clinically insane, Sir Isaac Newton. His parents had taught him that the law of God, their God, governed all other laws, including those of physics, and that if he wanted to, meaning God, he, though the detective had always imagined God to be a woman with large breasts and wide hips, he could countermand them at any time. He could literally change all the rules of the game without any warning or explanation whatsoever. This idea had stayed with the detective. Of course, he didn't really put any credence in it. Now, when Detective M looks back and in Detective S's direction several indistinct moments later, he no longer sees the glow of his partner's cigarette. He turns around once more and he squints, but is barely able to discern the faint outline of two orange-colored blotches of light blinking off and on in the distance. His head throbs, derisively mocking his attempts to clear it, to try and just think straight. He feels dizzy. Is this a malfunctioning of the endolymphatic sac in the membranous labyrinth? Perhaps. Must find the body and get back to the car. Hypothermia not good. Detective, where are you? He shouts out the detective's name repeatedly, straining his vocal cords. He waits for a response. And when it's apparent no answer is forthcoming, he continues walking, dejectedly, numbed from head to toe by the snow. Large crystalline flakes flitter about him in an ever-increasing frenzy, carried by the interminable winds. Mother Nature is angry, must get out fast. He is now unbearably cold and wet. When he looks down at where his feet ought to be, they're buried in whiteness. He observes a series of dark droplets trailing off into the distance. Blood? Is Detective S hurt? Perhaps the body's nearby. Or is the blood his own? No matter, he'll find the trail of droplets. Just follow the Gulps down. Another breath of dry, frigid air. Coldness stings his throat, constricts his asthmatic lungs. Perhaps he ought to quit smoking. If he gets out alive, he promises himself he'll quit for good. There's no sign of life out here. It's too cold. His brain is not working right. Water everywhere, but not a drop to think. He opens his eyes, and then he shuts them. He opens them, and then he shuts them again. He should have eaten something. Needs nourishment. No body. Nobody there. Follow the trail of droplets. Find Detective S. Nothing to do now but move forward, push onward. Just follow the trail. There's no sign of the card or of the road. There's no road signs. There are no blinking lights in the distance. No smoke. No smoke signals. No smell either, save that of his own thoughts, which reek of something old and rotten. He should have phoned for backup. He should have brought his cell phone with him. Mustn't die out here. Hypothermia. Detective M no longer sees the trail of droplets. He's blinded by the snow, which continues to whirl about like coarse flour blown through a large sieve. He has begun walking in another direction. In any direction, no direction. Where is he now? Where is here now? A hand lands behind his right ear suddenly, making a forceful bap. Smell of leather fills up his nose for an instant, then it's gone. Detective S would never wear leather gloves. Never. And then a voice, as calm as it is deep, speaks out. It will be all right. It says, here, take my hand. The detective now sees an orange-red colored object, perhaps a cloth or a scarf or a package, and as he bends down to grasp it, he also notices that the figure's silhouette, its hand outstretched in a gesture of camaraderie, is cowboy-like. It wears a hat, reminiscent of the Marlboro Man, whom the detective remembers from his childhood. And there seems to be a reddish glow emanating from behind its head, or perhaps this is simply the detective's imagination. The object moves farther from Detective M. With each moment now, each breath, or rather, is it he who moves away from it? His dangling legs leave twisted concave runnels behind him like the corpses of snow angels. If only there were more time to sort everything out, to think, to reason. But the object is gone already gone, and he can no longer hear himself think. A dog barks somewhere in the distance. I'm walking down the same dark street as earlier, my hands stuffed deep into my jacket pockets, the corners of my mouth tight, pinched, dry. A bitter wind ruffles the brittle leaves and the branches overhead. A few street lamps shed concentrated light on lonely patches of dark concrete, reveal flickering shapes that don't seem to be attached to anything in particular. The street is awash in silence, apart from the occasional passing car or motorbike. A boy of perhaps 9 or 10 has climbed up a telephone pole. He's hanging upside down from the rusty piece of metal protruding from the rotted wood. As he stares at me, he stretches his bottom lip down to his chin with the digits of his 4 filthy fingers, like an orangutan. I turn my head to look in the other direction. Nothing but more darkness. Narrow streets, traffic mirrors, vending machines, selling the usual array of items. Cigarettes, cheap liquor, porn, etc. I've forgotten why it is that I'm here. Yes, I was on my way home. Home. Moments later, I'm ascending the spiraling staircase leading to my apartment, our apartment, where I expect to find my wife of nearly 18 years preparing dinner for me, for us, that is, as usual. The cold, whitewashed stairs appear dull in the muted light of the hallway. I ascend one flight of stairs, and then a second, a third, and then a fourth. A young couple, laughing loudly, brush past me. Their arms are roped around each other's shoulders, as if trying to keep one another from catching cold, though I doubt this gesture will protect them from what's out there in those dark streets. The woman looks up at me, her mouth forming a vulgar O. Her uvula vibrates lasciviously as she titters. Hee 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 hee. Our eyes meet for a split second. An instant later, she and her partner are gone, their voices no more than faded echoes in the distance. The smell of something rotten, like week-old trash, assaults me as I inhale. Reaching into my coat pocket for a cigarette, I ascend another 2 flights of stairs as quickly as possible to escape the stench. The elevator is out of order, and I'm claustrophobic anyway. And now I'm finally standing in front of the door to my apartment, my home. The rotten smell's gone. I exhale, and giving up on the cigarette, fumble around in the opposite pocket for my keys. A Japanese oni demon's head my wife bought for me at a Buddhist temple. Mount Hiei, I think it was, dangles from the metal key ring, its eyes watchful. Soon the key is in the lock. Click. I step inside the darkened apartment and carefully take off my shoes. The place smells of burnt rice and fish. When I flip the light on, I see that the air is thick with a grayish-white smoke. I call out my wife's name, but to my dismay, no one answers. She isn't in the kitchen, nor is she in the tatami mat room. I drop my briefcase on the straw matting, and then I return to the small kitchen, where I turn on the exhaust fan. A metal pot lined with blackened film of what looks to be miso soup sits on the stove. The remains of scorched sardines clog up the drain, their desiccated guts ringing the perimeter of the sink. I knock on the toilet room door. Are you in there? The small frosted plastic window in the door is dark. So I slowly turn the knob and peer inside. My wife is a very private person, you see. She'll only let me have sex with her at night if I turn out all the lights, and I wouldn't dream of barging in like this if I actually thought she was in there. Empty, of course. The shower room's dark as well. Where has she gone? I turn around to look at the phone, which stands erect as a Shiva lingam on its plastic base. The small red light is blinking. I press the button and I cough with the palm of my hand. You have one message. Message number 1. Beep, 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 beep. End of messages. Click. A solicitor. A wrong number. A bad connection. I go and sit on one of the rectangular cushions beside the short-legged table in the tatami room, and I unzip my briefcase, extracting a small plastic convenience store bag from it. I lay the bag beside me before pulling up a loose mat from the floor, into which I empty all of its contents. Once I've completely replaced the mat, I walk back to the kitchen and I stand there. Wait. And now I hear approaching footsteps outside the apartment. It must be my wife, I think to myself, shutting off the light and shuffling up to the entranceway to peer through the peephole, the door. Someone's standing on the other side. It's a woman, though I cannot make her features out clearly. One thing is certain, however, she isn't my wife. My wife never wears such expensive, fashionable clothing, at least not around me. All the same, the concaveness, the peephole, must be distorting the woman's image to some extent. Appearances are deceptive. In my years as an amateur photographer, I've learned that seeing does not necessarily imply believing. Despite what so-called conventional wisdom dictates, it all depends on the angle one views things from, really. Why do people always try to reduce the world to ridiculous extremes, insisting all the while that life is complex? This is a conundrum I'll never be able to untangle. The woman's trying to open the door now. I hear the scraping of metal keys against the lock. Who is this? Who is she, anyway? With each of her exhalations, white mist emerges from her mouth and nose, drifts up toward the glass, the peephole. I drop my gaze any number of times to avoid the possibility of eye contact. Although she can't possibly know I'm watching her, it makes me feel better to do this. She is a complete stranger, this woman. A red stranger, aka no tanin, as we Japanese say. Should I open the door and ask her who she's looking for, or rather, do I just continue standing here, gazing at her from behind the glass peephole like some closet pervert? She might be drunk after all, insane even. What if she has some sort of dis-ease? Better to keep my distance. On the other hand, perhaps she has come with some clue about my wife's whereabouts. No, she can't possibly know my wife. I'm overanalyzing the situation. I'm letting my imagination run amok. A tendency to do this. I'm afraid it's genetic. Hello? Is anyone in there? Hello? Come on, open up, bangs on the door. You had something to show me, right? Well, it's freezing out here. Open up or I'm leaving. This isn't funny. I bite my lower lip and begin to tap my foot on the veneer-covered floor. I'm shivering. Reluctantly, I reach out to grasp the doorknob. My hand recoils from its icy sting. I see the woman standing there looking dumbfounded. She's waiting for me to let her in. Is she really looking for me, though? Whose apartment does she think this is? Now she's shoving the keys into her purse. I don't really want her to leave, but I can't make up my mind what I should do. I pull away from the peephole and turn on the overhead light. A long shadow describing the outline of a large housefly's thorax lies stretched across the ceiling like a dark gash. Out of season. Never seen such a huge one before. Not here in Japan. Hardy bugger, I say out loud, picking up a section of newspaper from beside the door and rolling it into a weapon. In an instant, the fly shadow's gone. I'm already too late. I unlatch the lock. I grab the icy doorknob with my free hand and I turn it until it stops. What the hell am I doing? It's freezing cold outside. The wind bites my skin. I should really eat something. I should take a hot bath. Relax a bit. Maybe have a beer. I've had such a long day at the office. Instead, I shout, "Hello, miss? Are you still there?" But there's no answer forthcoming. Not a moment later, my next-door neighbor's disheveled head of gray hair is protruding from the other side of her half-open door. What does she want? I repeat my incantation in a hoarse voice, though it's considerably weaker than the first time. My neighbors already slammed their door shut. I follow suit and, returning to the tatami room, stow my briefcase on top of the precarious stack of futon, plural, in the closet. And then I throw on my jacket, grab a sterile gauze mask from the bulging package I keep stowed next to the television set. Gotta keep the germs out. And put on my laceless shoes. Then I exit the apartment. This time I'm ready for the cold. The gauze mask covers my nose and mouth, and I've got my insulated leather gloves with me. "Miss, are you there? Hello?" I'm taking the stairs, 2 at a time now. My adrenaline's pumping, and I feel as though I'm a human drag car. Vroom! What on earth am I doing out here at this hour? Now, wait a minute. Did I even remember to lock the door? And what about that rolled up section of newspaper I'd planned on using to swat the fly? Did I stuff it in my briefcase, or had I left it on the floor of the tatami mat room? The woman with the keys. Find her. Yes, indeed. My instincts are rarely wrong. She may know where my wife is, after all. Logistical conclusion to what amounts to an a priori assumption. Either that or it's a very illogical conclusion to a not yet qualified or quantified problem. In either case, I really need to find out for myself. The stairs are covered in something wet and slippery. I smell that rotten stench I'd inhaled earlier yet again, despite the mask that I'm wearing, and before long, I'm out in the streets, the apartment building towering at my back. A few kilometers ahead, I see the woman's figure turn, and then it disappears down a narrow street paralleling the one I came home by, her long, lustrous dark hair trailing behind her, like the ribbons from a processional carp. Each of her heels makes a distinct noise as it hits the pavement in succession. Clip-clop, clip-clop, clip-clop. It is as if I'm inside of a dream, though this time I'm the one doing the pursuing rather than vice versa. I can barely see a thing out here. "Excuse me, miss, please, if you just, My throat's parched. My face is drenched in chilled beads of sweat. My chest hurts, and I feel as if I'm going to throw up. But despite all of it, I find myself catching up to the woman. She's taken another sharp turn around another corner, leading to yet another alleyway. Why do these alleys suddenly all look the same to me? I can no longer distinguish north from south, east from southeast, west from... I need a map. I need a compass. Something, some sort of signpost for guidance. This is in the days before smartphones and Google Maps, by the way. How I wish I'd stayed in the apartment after all. Idiot. I should have just lain down, gone to sleep. The reassuring drone of the television set, lulling me to La La Land in the background. What if my wife returns while I'm out here chasing another woman? Ironically, in hopes of discovering her, meaning my wife, her whereabouts. Will she come looking for me the next time? I turn around. A loud static hiss fills my head, and a moment later, I'm laid out flat on the cold black concrete. Before I've had any time to recover my equilibrium, a loaf of bread whacks me in the nose, causing my tear ducts to leak, which, technically speaking, isn't the same as crying. There's a trail of broken eggs behind me. There's 2 packs of fermented beans, called natto. And now I see the toppled bicycle a bit further on. To the right of the bicycle, my right, that is, directly under a dim street lamp, sits an attractive young girl. Her creamy legs are spread-eagled on the pavement. Her cotton underpants peer out from beneath them, pink with white polka dots. She's clothed in a traditional navy blue school uniform. White stripes line the sleeves and bottom of her skirt, while the flesh of her 2 goosebump-riddled legs are exposed all the way to the tops of the almost see-through white socks on her feet. The girl sits up, her adolescent limbs now fanned out in front of her in a giant V, and she looks directly at me. I, in turn, look away, embarrassed. Thankfully, I'm still wearing the mask. When finally I glance back at the girl's round face, I notice the glistening streak of slimy egg white slowly trickling down her forehead. I peer down at my leg, which suddenly smarts, hurts, to see there's a dark stain covering my ankle. It must have collided with the pedal of the girl's bicycle. The cuffs of my pants are covered in blood as well. An excessive amount of blood, considering the modest size of the wound on my ankle. I've cramps from running so hard. It must be age catching up with me. Too many cigarettes, too much late-night karaoke with co-workers, not to mention the beer, the unmemorable sex with seedy snack bar hostesses, the fights with my wife, the excessive stress, the stress, the girl's crying now. I should really say something. Yes, I ought to apologize for not having seen her. It's my fault that this happened, or is it? But I can't force the words. She's stopped crying now, thankfully. Her mouth's opening. I think she's going to, who are you? I've seen you somewhere before. I look down at her cherubic visage, which is streaked in tears, still sticky with raw egg. No, I don't believe so. Yes, I've seen you before. I can tell. Even with the mask on, I can tell. The girl smiles at me. She's cute. In fact, she looks a bit like my own daughter, though I'm certain I've never encountered her before. No, she appears to be just another average high school girl who probably giggles like a 10-year-old, who's probably obsessed with young girl manga, comics. Of course, my daughter's anything but average. I smile back, feeling the blood rush to my partially exposed cheeks. My ass hurts. It's damn cold here on the pavement. I know who you are. I want you to start running. Why should I run, I think to myself, but I remain silent. You're looking for someone, aren't you? Wait for me in the alley, that one over there, pointing. Catch up with you later, Daddy. I don't know why exactly, but I begin to sprint down the alleyway as fast as I can, my ankles still throbbing dully. When at last she's out of sight, I stop to catch my breath for a moment. Did she call me Daddy? Interview with Mr. Name Deleted, father of victim, name deleted. Transcription from video number 35758, classified information. Whoa, listen to the wind howl out there, would you? Oh boy, it's as if God's angry with us for treating her with disdain or something. Chuckles and coughs. I can't promise that. Peppery static. 31 seconds, picture fades back in. And if I smoke, I've been trying to quit for years, but those damn nicotine patches don't do anything other than make me crave more of these foul cigarettes. I tell you, there's just no escaping it. Life's a bitch, then you die, as the saying goes. Before you know what's hit you, you're all covered up in dirt. Laughs weakly, takes a cigarette from the box, puts it in his mouth, and lights it with a match. If you're really lucky, somebody that is a priest or whatever, will convert your corpse into a pile of ash for a price, of course. Just look at this cigarette here. Holds the lit cigarette up. This cigarette, well, not this exact cigarette, of course, but another one just like it. If, in fact, you believe that any two objects can really be the same in any sense, A equals A, or whatever, will give millions of people cancer, lung cancer, heart problems, and so forth. This year alone, not to mention birth defects. I mean, isn't that what the Surgeon General of the United States claims? So you put the thing into your mouth, light it with something that produces fire, a match, a lighter, a propane torch if you got really big balls. And the more poison you inhale from the thing, exponentially speaking, the more ash it produces. What's the difference, though, between the ash produced from this cigarette and the ash that remains after a dead body is incinerated, other than pure quantity? Will you tell me? Very little. Sure, the chemical properties are different, but that's not what I'm getting at. I mean, ash is ash, right? Can you tell the difference? Shit. You probably can because, well, you're trained to do this kind of work. So yeah, okay, different, but like not so different that you'd be able to distinguish it if I turned out the lights and asked you to identify which was which, okay? Are your fingers that sensitive, detective? Takes a drag from the cigarette, puts it back onto the rim of the ashtray. Anyways, I was saying, this cigarette, or what it signifies for the sake of discussion, which is any or all cigarettes, will kill you fast. But if you stop smoking and start going to the gym, you start eating healthy foods and drinking that soy crap that everyone says is so good for you, but it tastes awful, where will you be in 20, 30, 50 years? Dead, right? Buried in the earth, scattered maybe over the Passaic River, if your religion allows for that kind of thing. That is, no matter what's the fucking difference, I don't know. Taps cigarette against the side of the tray, squints, taking a long drag. I started smoking when I was 12 years old. Pop was a heavy smoker. Fucking bastard. Used to put the things out on my arm before using me as a punching bag. He was sexually frustrated because he couldn't get it up. At least that's my theory. Those were the days before Viagra was an option, mind you. He beat mama too. By the time I was 15, I was addicted to burning myself with cigs, as we call them. You know, not only cigarettes, but also cigars. If I wanted a bigger burn for my buck, or is it bang? Because, well, it was the only way I could tell that I was still alive. I used to light up in the bathroom when no one else was around, take a good long drag, and then swap the burn marks from Pop's cigs with my own. I didn't want his burn marks all over my skin, so I made new ones on top of them instead. Sick, eh? I was sick, let me tell you. Years and years of psychological counseling haven't really changed all that, though the drugs do help. Somewhat. Holds a cigarette up directly in front of his face, stares at it as it burns, pauses, and takes another drag. By the time I was 16, I had my first girlfriend. She had already dropped out of high school. She was living with her senile grandma, who couldn't take care of herself, no less her granddaughter. Anyway, we liked to burn each other with cigs, marijuana, anything that would make us feel good, both inside and out, if you know what I mean. Blinks his right eyelid, and then he rubs his eyelid. We especially liked doing it while we were having sex. It's true, though. I don't want you getting any funny ideas about us. I mean, in fact, this really has little to do with the current case, anyway. Coughs into his hand. I hired you to catch my daughter's killer, detective. And all that I've got to remember her by now is a small pile of ash I brought back with me from the Hocus Pocus Buddha temple in Japan. Now, that's not right. I loved her dearly as she loved me. Stares directly up at the camera lens. I know you're taping this with your hidden cameras. I can see that those shiny mirrors over there pointing are hiding one such camera. Could we do this off the record, please? I really don't see the point in all this high-tech equipment running all the fucking time. It makes me feel like I'm the one on trial here, and it gives me a goddamn headache too. I bet this shit's all made in Japan, right? Turn it off. Screen goes blank, followed by static. Mr. Yamaguchi, or Yamaguchi-san, as his colleagues call him, liked to collect women's things. He was especially fond of their hair and their nail clippings, their dry skin that had sloughed off into the sink, dirty tissues containing all manner of bodily fluids, blood, mucus, dried saliva, etc. He considered himself a collector, a connoisseur. He could tell, for example, the difference between the manner in which a hair taken from the top of the head and one from the region of the underarm or the pubis curled, smelled, or felt merely by weighing it in the palm of his hand. He could distinguish a fingernail that came from a woman's pinky from one clipped or torn from a ring finger by rubbing it back and forth between his sensitive fingers. Yamaguchi-san was not a pervert, however. Far from it, he stared lecherous hentai perverts down whenever they looked at his little girl. She would always be little to him, with lust in their eyes, or tried to grab his wife's sagging ass on a crowded train. He did not have any tolerance for this sort of behavior. It made him sick enough to imagine all sorts of methods of torture. But lucky for the perverts, Mr. Yamaguchi was not a man of action. He was a dreamer. He was one who kept his innermost thoughts and feelings to himself most of the time. The real perverts, chikan, or hentai, as they are called, Japan. In Yamaguchi-san's estimation, they were the stalkers, they were the flashers, the people who imposed themselves on women by making their presence and intentions obvious. True hentai were crass, disgusting creatures. They infested his country like a plague. He, on the opposite side of this sticky coin, was engaged in a totally different kind of activity. He collected in a discreet, non-confrontational manner that hurt absolutely no one at all. Unseen, unheard, he helped to keep public restrooms around the city from overflowing while adding to his private collection of impersonal yet subtly unique dead skin, hair, nail clippings, and the like. While true perverts, and in Mr. Yamaguchi's world, those who watched sex videos at home or went to peep shows were not really perverts, they were just lonely men. True perverts secretly longed to make their presence known to their victims. Even the grabbers did their things in public. A collector, however, such as himself, did his utmost to remain no more than a shadow. One might even call him an anti-victimizer, one who would have been happy fading into the corner of the woman's room toilet, like a fly on the wall, rubbing its feelers over the hairs left behind the drain, or the dark brown tampons in the waste disposal bin, unannounced and unnoticed. The reason Yamaguchi-san did not collect these golden droppings, as he was wont to refer to them, from men was that he had absolutely no desire to touch, couldn't even contemplate touching such vile things. Men's hair, nail clippings, these things were dirty, and they smelled like the locker rooms he'd been forced to use in his high school days. They had a heavy, masculine quality about them that reeked of something that ought to remain buried in the trash bin. The old skin they shed was rough, pasty, and if they left behind bloody tissues, it was because the blood had gushed from their ugly, runny noses, or from wounds inflicted by violence, usually involving other men, or an accidental fall, perhaps. He was not interested in such things. They were anathema to his vital role as a collector of fine delicacies. If a woman's plucked eyebrow hair was like a glass of vintage wine, Yamaguchi-san often rationalized, then a man's was a can of cheap beer after the fizz had been expelled from it like so much flatulence. Cheers. One night after arriving home, or upon arriving home from his ever-stressful job at the office, Yamaguchi-san was surprised to find no one else was around. The apartment was dark, and when he turned on the light to look for his collection, usual place, a very odd feeling crept over him. He paused, touched his hand to his balding head, and let out a shriek. "Gone! It's gone!" he screamed. Feeling suddenly weary, he rushed toward the kitchen to splash some cold water on his face. But he tripped over himself on the way, and once he had doused his hands and forehead sufficiently, he hastily returned to check his hiding place another time. But no matter how long he stared at the empty space in which the neatly arranged collection had once been, it failed to materialize. Water dripped off of his nose and chin, pitter-pattering onto the tatami mats below, as he stood there gazing into the black hole in his floor for some time, too shocked for words. And then he came to a grim realization. He was going to have to question his wife and his daughter about this. They could very well be guilty. But how to broach the subject? There just wasn't any acceptable way he could imagine of doing so. Collecting was his private obsession, and he couldn't let anyone else know about it. Least of all his beloved family, whom he always tried so hard to protect, to keep out of harm's way. It's a scary world out there. Can't be too careful. What if he's wrong? What if he was wrong, and if it wasn't one or both of them in the first place? But then, logically speaking, who else could have stolen or worse discarded the collection if not one or both of them? Certainly no one from the outside world would have come in to bother, burglarizing the apartment with the sole intent of stealing his golden droppings. Who out there in this godforsaken, image-obsessed city would be refined enough to appreciate his collection? There were absolutely no signs of a break-in, at any rate. Best not to jump to any conclusions, he told himself. Somebody, singular or plural, was playing a game with him, and he wasn't going to concede defeat so quickly. Rather, he would handle this like an intelligent and rational man. He would hire a private investigator, someone who could get inside the mind or minds of the perpetrator or perpetrators, someone who would always be one step ahead of the game. Yamaguchi-san had the greatest of respect for investigators, detectives such as those depicted in the fiction of Japanese mystery writer Edogawa Rampo, whose pen name had itself been taken from the master of suspense himself, Edgar Allan Poe. Edogawa Rampo, Edgar Allan Poe. Poe's writings had been an inspiration to Mr. Yamaguchi-san, ever since he had read, at the age of 12, a Japanese translation of the author's brilliant ratiocinative trilogy of short stories, featuring the shrewdest of all fictional detectives who ever was, C.A. Dupin. Real-life investigators, he knew, those who had risked their lives going undercover for their clients every day. They were trained to not be seen. And Mr. Yamaguchi therefore believed them to be the most valuable members of a society increasingly preoccupied with loud, blaring announcements, advertisements, and all manner of attention-getting paraphernalia. Let me remind the viewer, there was no SNS at the time, there was no social media, there was no smartphone, etc. It was as if people in his country had been repressed for so long that they were now collectively shouting out, "Hey, here I am! See me, hear me, notice me." Young university-age punks dyed their hair all manner of colors, smoked cigarettes in the subways despite the no-smoking signs, leaving behind trails of dirty ash in their wake, piercing their ears, their noses, wearing loud clothing. The chikang perverts wore rain jackets and flashed their naked penises at women in order to garner attention, or worse, they imposed their bodies upon unsuspecting victims, usually after sundown. And then there were the masses of faceless salarymen who crowded the trains in swarms, their breath smelling of liquor, their eyes surrounded by dark rings, their faces indescribably sad. It was the salaryman, ironically, the lack of defining characteristics, hobbies, dreams, the salaryman had created the perverts and the punks, or so Yamaguchi-san believed. The detectives, though, were different. They managed to be both invisible and engaged at the same time, and for this reason, Yamaguchi-san concluded they would one day inherit the earth. Yamaguchi-san would like to have investigated on his own, but he simply had too many responsibilities at work. His day started at 8:30 in the morning, and it didn't end until after 11 p.m. most nights. Besides, his boss had promised him that there would be a sharp increase in business trips in the coming months, and some of them overseas. He might even get to travel to New York City, which had been his dream ever since he'd seen the films Taxi Driver and Dog Day Afternoon, both starring Al Pacino. First, however, he would need to hire a detective or two to follow his wife and his daughter around the clock. He would also ask to have a hidden surveillance system installed in his apartment. Every room would be wiretapped. Yamaguchi-san again scratched the top of his balding head, and he looked down at the vacant space where his collection had been. A few pieces of whitish dandruff drifted toward the floor like snowflakes. She was lost. He had told her to meet him at apartment 525. He'd said she should open the door with a key he'd given her, and he'd explained that there was something he wanted to show her, something she would undoubtedly be interested in. She'd known he was a hentai pervert, had known he was up to no good, he was a loose cannon, certainly not to be trusted, but she'd let her curiosity get the best of her. Or was it maybe something else? In any case, she'd allowed herself to be talked into doing something she knew to be completely irrational. He'd implied that what he had to show her was something that could potentially have a profound impact on her life. Those were his exact words. That it was something which had once belonged to her, and that it might once again belong to her if she would just follow his precise instructions, be a, quote, good girl, an expression that had made her physically nauseous for some inexplicable, perhaps psychological reason. And to meet him at the appointed time. She knew it was dangerous to be out here by herself in the dark like this. No car, no bicycle, nothing on her person, just a rail pass and a small handbag, a Louis Vuitton imitation gifted to her by an admirer from Shanghai, whom she had slept with only a couple of times. It was a long story. She'd broken it off because she couldn't stand his halitosis every time he kissed her, or his insistence on coming on her face every time they had sex, and etc., etc., etc. And now she was lost out here, freezing cold. She couldn't help wondering why he had answered the door, why he hadn't answered the door. Was he playing some sort of game with her? Was this a test? It was highly unlikely he would have given her the wrong address. And why hadn't she brought a map of the city along? She knew all too well she had a terrible time with directions. The JR train station, which she could have sworn was nearby, was nowhere in sight. She'd made a mental note of the rusted metal shack on the corner and of the double-pronged mirrors at the intersection with the Liberal Democratic Party advertisement affixed to it. She simply must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. It was deathly quiet out here. How she wanted to just crawl up in her own bed, turn on the television set, and fall asleep. Sleep was the great redeemer. As she approaches another dark intersection now, she realizes she has a simple but profound choice to make: turn left or turn right. In either case, there seems to be no hope of finding her way back to the station at this point. She observes row upon row of identical houses lining either side of the street, though none of them have their lights on. It can't be that late already, can it? She glances at the dial of her wristwatch. It is speckled with tiny brownish flecks, mud perhaps, but it hasn't rained recently. Must have spilled something before leaving the office. Nearly 3 hours have passed since she left the man's apartment complex. She begins to feel dizzy and decides that she suddenly needs to sit down, which she does on the pavement. Drawing her knees in toward her chest, she exhales. She can feel panic attacks on the way. This is not a good time. Am I losing my mind, doctor? I just can't seem to remember things well anymore. No, my dear, you aren't losing your mind. You're just under a lot of stress now, postmenopausal stress. But doctor, I haven't yet reached menopausal age. Never mind, scratch that then. Clears his throat. It's stress, I tell you. Stress, my dear. You can't argue with that. Open your mouth for me. What? Why? I said open your mouth. Please, this is important now. Do as I say. Well, okay. Yes, just like that. Good. Now, I'm just going to check your mouth for any abnormal bacterial matter. Shh, don't try to talk. I'm simply checking to make sure that you don't have any sort of, bacterial infection from. You once worked as a club hostess, isn't that so? It's right here in your medical record. There's a new law that requires the disclosure of such information from you, the patient, to meet the doctor, so I can best serve your needs. Splendid, isn't it? So then providing men with must have been one of your duties, right? As a snack bar hostess. I've been to those places myself many times. Actually, in my youth, I was, not recently. Of course, I still had hair back then. I was really quite handsome. Would you like to see a photo? I'm sorry, what did you say? It's okay. We're almost finished. I should have the results for you within 48 hours. Oh, I found a cavity as well. We can attend to that later when you're more relaxed. You know I'm a qualified orthodontist in addition to being a practitioner of general medicine, don't you? That's right, I do it all. You won't even remember what happened anyway. So then, if you just let me... It's so that you don't scream, darling. Is it uncomfortable? Stop squirming around so much. I won't hurt you, dear. If this cuts into your wrists, just say so. So sorry, just nod your head, okay? You should still be able to move your head freely, even with the cloth in your mouth. Oh my, can't allow any of that lovely long hair of yours to get caught in the tape. Let's see now. Oops, sorry, it'll grow back. Trust me, of course mine never has. But the genes for male pattern baldness run in my family. I seriously doubt you'll have the same problem. You're really gorgeous when you're tied up, even more beautiful than I'd pictured. Has anyone ever told you that? All right, now this may feel a bit strange at first. There we go, good girl. That's good. You're a good girl, aren't you? What did you say? Oh, I don't understand what you're saying. Okay, now let's just proceed. And she retches onto the cold pavement, rolls onto her side. Covering her tear-stained face with her hands, a phantom mist hovers above the pile of vomit before being swept away by a gust of strong wind. A dog barks somewhere in the distance. I'm going to stop there.